I used to do my Christmas shopping for my mother in that store when I was young. And I'd already told you every year Uncle John, Father John, would send the $10 or $15. And every year I would go up to Boswell's gift shop. Mrs. Boswell had a son a couple years older than me. And she was doing okay now, but she had been through some very rough times with her young son, and she had great empathy for my mother and myself. She was a prim and proper woman in her early 50s, and rather skilled at dealing with young boys. Every year she would figure out a way to get me to tell her how much money I had. And every year she would say, pick out something for your mother. And I would go around the store, and nothing was marked in her store. There were no prices. And I would pick out 2 or 3 or 4 things, and I would bring them to the counter. And every year, Mrs. Boswell, with great ceremony, would take a piece of paper and a pencil and start calculating the cost of the items that I had selected for my mother, as well as the cost of the gift wrapping, which she charged for. And every year, miraculously, no matter what I chose, and I don't think there was anything in the store for less than $10. It was a very nice gift shop. Every year, no matter what I chose, it was always like about 15 or 20 cents less than the amount of money I walked in with. It was always like $14.92 or $9.57, so that I would always receive change back, as well as 2, 3, or 4 items that I had bought for my mother for Christmas presents. I don't know how old I was before I realized what Mrs. Boswell was doing. I told this story 3 years ago on the air in Tampa about Mrs. Boswell and what a fantastic lady she was. How she really understood Christmas. It was over 30 years and 1,300 miles. And there was somebody that listened to it that knew Mrs. Boswell, and called me and gave me Mrs. Boswell's address. Told me where she was and how she was doing. She was now in her 80s. And I lost the damn piece of paper. The following year I told the story again, and fortunately the same person heard me. Got in touch with Mrs. Boswell, who dropped me a note. I wrote back to her, and I thanked her ever so much for all that she had done. For allowing a little boy to get his mother nice presents, and allowing a little boy to walk away with dignity, thinking that he had really paid for them, and even got some change back, and how much I appreciated it. And what a fantastic lady that she was. She was by then 83 years old. What do you think the odds are of something like that happening, huh? At least I did get a chance to thank her. She was probably the most incredible woman I've ever run into when it comes to Christmas. I could not possibly go through a Christmas without thinking of Mrs. Boswell.
Silver bells, it's Christmas time in the city.
Wishing you the best of the season. This is WLS Chicago Talk Radio 890.
WLS.
Time at the Jingle Bells, 5 o'clock.
Closing telephone poles and arranging the mountain paper just so it hides the base of the Christmas tree so that the train set can go into the tunnel and come out from the tunnel. And they'll be checking to make sure that the automatic gate goes up and down when the train passes, and that the lights are set just right on the tree and inside the little plastic doll houses. He's spreading out the grass with a fine-tooth comb and putting down the gravel roads and putting the little cars in and the little people. That'll keep him busy all night long. He'll look over every now and then as the presents are being opened. And somewhere Aunt Kate will serve a bowl of the most disgusting-looking gravy you have ever seen in your life. It will taste better than ever. And Uncle Franny will carve the bird with skill and precision. And the kids will let me play with their toys. And Aunt Marie and Uncle Joe will stop by, and she'll be loud and boisterous, but full of love. Uncle Joe will have too many beers and kind of nod off over on the couch. And all of their kids will stop by, too. And somewhere, a kid's going to get an English racer bicycle like I did one year. And we'll both go out and give it a try. And some kid's going to get a hook and ladder fire truck. And we'll both dream of roaring off to save the day, going... Somewhere a kid's going to get a baseball bat and a glove. I'll help him count every day till spring. And some kid's going to get a great big stuffed animal. And I'll be there to help him hug it. I wonder if kids still get red wagons and scooters and Lincoln Logs and Boy Scout knives for Christmas. Do you suppose they pay extra special attention to each and every detail of their Christmases? So that the Christmas will last forever? Georgie will be settling down into his favorite chair, that great big overstuffed gray one, so that he can oversee every single aspect of the extravaganza. At the last possible moment, Grandmom will make the final finishing touches on the table and come in with her apron still on, just in time to watch the presents being opened. And somewhere tonight, a young boy is practicing for a solo on Old Holy Night at the Christmas Day Mass. And somewhere, we'll all gather together again for the best Christmas ever, around the prettiest tree ever. And we'll feast on the best possible dinner ever.
How much it would cost, if it was in a toy store, what aisle it was on, if it came out of a catalog, the page, the catalog number, even the weight and price. Christmas at 128 Maple Avenue was primarily Christmas Day. But you see, Christmas really is 2 days in my family. Christmas Eve was spent at 928 Morton Street in Camden, New Jersey. That's where my grandparents lived, in this great big yellow brick row house. I remember walking in there on Christmas Eves and just being blown away. They didn't decorate all that much. There was a tree, frankly a rather silly-looking artificial tree that sat right by the front door in a ridiculous position. And there might have been some special dishes with candies set around, but there wasn't any holly or evergreen or any of that kind of stuff, just the Christmas tree. They were my favorite. The first chickies I used to like because they looked weird. But I really liked the prune-filled cookies. There was so much attention to detail, even down to the butter. It was molded butter. All in the shape of a little baby Jesus. Maybe it sounds silly, but that's what it was. It was a very busy day. There were so many things to be done. And the menu was always the same. Every year, without fail, the menu was exactly the same. An incredibly large bowl of potato salad. And an incredibly large Polish ham. And there were all different kinds of bread and rolls and pastries. Sometimes some baked beans. And the reason it was a cold supper is because, well, there were just so many things to do, and you had to get dressed and go to midnight mass, and it was just a lot easier to prepare this all ahead rather than cook up until the last minute. But nonetheless, even though you were serving cold ham and potato salad, in essence a buffet dinner, they brought out all the finest. They didn't have bank accounts, and they didn't have real estate holdings. They put all of their money into furniture and flatware and dishes and things like that because that's the way they celebrated holidays. And then on Christmas Day, it would be at my house. And that's where the presents were opened. At least in the early years. My grandmother was a dressmaker, who also worked in a cigar factory. My grandfather a carpenter and paper hanger. My dad was a tool and die maker and a part-time accordion player. My mom was a telephone operator, and Irene was a legal secretary. And that was it. That was the family. There were no other people in this country who were related. There were no other children, no nieces, no nephews. Just us. And this huge feast on Christmas Eve. And again, it was just us. And another huge feast back at my house on Christmas Day. Plus all of the toys, of course. And a train set. It was kind of a tradition at my house. My father spent hour upon hour upon hour putting that together. Nothing terribly elaborate by today's standards, but a lot of attention, a lot of detail. The telephone poles were strung with cotton. The roads were actual real crushed gravel. And the little Plasticville houses and the little Lionel train set. I doubt even in those days the whole thing cost $50. But it was still fantastic and it was still part of it. And that didn't last very long. That all changed when I was 8 years old.
Listen. The final seconds of the year are ticking away.
Avenue. Never again would I see the lavish oak table and all the silver and fancy dishes at my grandmother's house again on Christmas. We moved into a two-room apartment at 103 Conard Avenue in Collingswood, New Jersey. The first Christmas there was a lot different than the previous ones. The living room, which was also the bedroom, was one of the most incredibly cluttered rooms that you can imagine. In that small room, which had been the dining room of this Center Hall Colonial that had fallen on hard times and been turned into apartments, contained a spinet piano, 2 sleeping couches, a large RCA television, a coffee table, 2 end tables, a 3-tiered table, and a gold armchair, and 3 massive table lamps, remnants of the marriage. Things were to be a lot different this year. The entire procedure would change. Instead of going to my grandmother's house on Christmas Eve, my father was coming over to my house. He was scheduled to arrive at 4 o'clock that afternoon. He did. Several weeks before, he had asked me what I wanted for Christmas, just as my mother had done. And being the good kid that I was, I sat down and put together a list of things that I wanted for Christmas. I kept a budget in mind. I was 8 years old. No, excuse me. I was 8 years old. I kept a budget in mind, and I listed about 5 or 6 different things, 4 of which I still remember. And I gave the list to my mother. And I gave the list to my father. And these 2 young adults, now approaching their early 30s, just recently separated, full of bitterness and hate, as unfortunately a lot of people are when they're going through a divorce, never bothered to check with each other. So at 4 o'clock that afternoon when my father arrived, it took 2 trips for him to carry all of the presents in from the car. And there were some pleasantries exchanged, a little bit of eggnog, a few snacks were put out, and then finally it became time to open the presents. And there was a little bit of jockeying between my mother and my father. And finally it was decided that I would open my father's presents first. And one of the things that I had asked for was a red fire truck, hook and ladder, a replica of the LaFrance fire truck that they had down at the Collingswood fire station. And that was the first thing I opened up. Oh, God, I was happy. I wanted that so bad. And I wanted a microscope set, and that was the second thing I opened up. And there was this plastic stagecoach with removable drivers and luggage and guns and things like that, and that was the third thing I opened up. And the fourth thing that I wanted was this blue Buick, this blue plastic Buick, the kind that had the headlights that turned on, and the trunk opened up, and there was a spare tire, and the doors opened and closed, and For some strange reason, I can't remember the other things that were on the list, but they were the primary things. They were the things I really wanted. And oh, my God, I was happy. And it never dawned on me. I just never noticed it as I was opening these things up and squealing with delight, just as happy could be. A child's wishes come true. It never dawned on me that with each successive package that was opened, my mother's heart sank a little bit more. It was very easy for them to duplicate the presents because I told them where to get them. And that's precisely what they had done. I received 2 of everything that year. I thought it was the neatest damn Christmas well, it still is the neatest damn Christmas I've ever spent. Can you imagine not 1, but 2 blue Buicks, not 1, but 2 plastic stagecoaches, not 1, but 2 microscope sets, not 1, but 2, count them, LaFrance hook and ladder fire trucks. It was great. I don't know how she did it. She didn't make much money. But no matter what I asked for, I always got it. I always got my wishes. To this day, I don't know how she pulled it off, or what kind of sacrifices were required. I guess I never will. Needless to say, that never happened again. It straightened out those 2 people in a hurry. I was still hoping next year, but it didn't work out that way. Next year, I got the English Racer, and only 1 of them. But next year, they moved the piano out into the hall, and my father came over and set up the train platform again. There was a problem with that, though. Unfortunately, the floor was not even, and the train could only go around halfway, and then you had to push it up the hill. It couldn't quite make it itself. And Christmas days from that point on, instead of being spent at home, were spent at Aunt Kate and Uncle Franny's. I'll take you over there after we come back.
From all of us at WLS Talk Radio 890.
Merry Christmas!
Lassiter. Welcome back, Fun Seekers. Christmas Eve, 1990. Lassiter with you at WLS Talk Radio 890. Chicago's talk station, 6 minutes after the hour of 5 o'clock. Said that when I was 8, things changed, and they sure did. No more were there the intimate, relatively fancy Christmas Eve gatherings and then the relatively intimate feasts over at my house. Not with my father's side of the family. I spent every Christmas for the next 7 or 8 years with my mother's side of the family. There was Aunt Kate and Uncle Franny, and Eileen and Michael and Richard and Jimmy and Rosemary and Grandpa Potts. It didn't matter to me that there weren't fancy dishes on the table. These people were much more humble, much less pretentious than my father's side of the family. Because there were some very special things for me. I was allowed to sit at the table with the adults. I didn't have to sit with the kids. The table wasn't big enough for all the people. And Aunt Kate would bring out this marvelous, immense turkey and set it in front of Uncle Franny, and he would start to carve it. I would always get a leg. Nobody else did, just me. I'd sit at the table with the adults and got the leg. They were good years. Very good years. And they're all the toys that all the kids got, and they'd all let me play with them because I was the oldest cousin. It was kind of a pecking order, and if the oldest cousin wanted to play with your toy, just no complaint about it. You just gave it to him. I tried not to take too bad advantage of it. I hope I didn't. Then there was the Uncle Henry problem. Divorce was a lot different in the early 1950s than it is today. It was quite a stigma. And people didn't like to talk about it, and people didn't like to acknowledge it, and people didn't like to deal with people who were divorced. And there was this one Christmas day. It was relatively warm, as I recall, when Aunt Kate, who always made a fuss over me, called me out into the kitchen. Very unusual. And she asked me to step outside into the backyard, and I said I'd go get my coat. And she said no, that wouldn't be necessary. We wouldn't be out there very long, but she wanted to talk to me. Aunt Kate never wanted to talk to me out in the backyard away from everybody else. And when we got out there, she said that there was a problem. And the problem was that Uncle Henry wasn't there. And she didn't want to tell her kids why Uncle Henry wasn't there, that they weren't old enough to understand, and that she wanted me to go along with a little game. And she said that she had told her kids that Uncle Henry was a cowboy, and that he was off fighting Indians at Christmas and wouldn't be able to make dinner. And asked me if I would agree, if the kids brought it up, that that's indeed what the case was. And I said I would. I remember being a little bit stunned. As a matter of fact, for many, many years, I was very bitter about that. I was very bitter that I had to lie to my cousins in such a ridiculous, absurd lie on top of that. Years again have mellowed me, and I understand. I don't appreciate it, but I understand. Aunt Kate was a strange woman. She never told her children any different. It was only when they got into their teens that they figured out that, there weren't any more Indian fights, and Uncle Henry probably wasn't a cowboy. Later on in the evening, after the dinner dishes were cleared, Uncle Joe and Aunt Marie would come by with Joey and Gary and Tommy and Patty, and Uncle Jack, if he was in town, he was a sailor. He would come by with his family, Aunt Philly, little Jackie, Kathleen. Next-door neighbors would come over. It would be a house full of people, very, very unlike the relatively intimate Christmases I had spent previously. And then in 1960, I did something incredibly stupid. Kids can be so stupid. I ran away from home. But guess when I decided to run away from home? Right before Christmas. I went to New York. I wanted to be a star. I wanted to be a stand-up comedian. And decided I couldn't do that living in Collingswood, New Jersey. I'd have to go to New York, and didn't have too much money, and so I took what I had, and as soon as I got there, I hocked my luggage and everything else I had and rented a room at the Midtown YMCA. I think it's on 34th Street or 33rd. Doesn't really make much difference. It's a drab little room, as most YMCAs are, and it got to be Christmas Eve. I was out of money, feeling very, very lonely and very, very sorry for myself. And I was just sitting in my room on Christmas Eve, bored, silly, wondering why in the name of God I had picked that time of the year to run away. I mean, couldn't it have waited for another week or two? Oh. Then I laid down and I took a nap, and I probably had dreams of Christmases past and what they were doing then. And around 5:30 I woke up, decided to go out and get a hot dog. It was all I'd have to eat that day. So I put on my clothes and got in the elevator, went downstairs into the lobby, and stepped outside only to find out that the time that I had gone to sleep, and then there had been 5 inches of brand new white powdery snowfall in the city. It was the most beautiful sight I'd ever seen in my entire life. And down the street was the Hotel Manhattan, with the Caroline playing Silver Bells. And I'm trudging through the snow down toward the hot dog stand at 5:30 on a Christmas Eve evening, tears running down my cheeks. To this day, that song can bring tears to my eyes. Silver Bells. 10 years later, I found myself in St. Thomas in the Virgin Islands on Christmas Day. A place that doesn't really celebrate Christmas, running this little rinky-dink radio station. I gave everybody the day off. I had no family, I had no friends, I had no place to go on Christmas Day, so I gave everybody at the station the day off and decided to run the station single-handedly myself for 15 and a half hours playing Christmas music. We didn't have that many albums of Christmas music, so we just played the same stuff over and over and over again for 15 and a half hours. I never wanted to hear Christmas music again. Well, one of the people that worked for me, he felt sorry for me, and he stopped by in the late afternoon with a beautiful Christmas dinner that his mother had made, along with some of his father's notorious eggnog. Eggnog known throughout the entire Virgin Islands as being killer eggnog. I consumed the dinner, we exchanged pleasantries, and he left a quart of the stuff with me, which I proceeded to drink. Within no time flat, I am drunk. Playing the same Christmas music over and over and over again. Again, tears just streaming down my cheeks for Christmas has passed. I almost never touch eggnog anymore. And have no Christmas music whatsoever in my house for fear that I might play it every day for 15 and a half hours. By 1972, I was living in Utica, New York, and running another little rinky-dink radio station. I didn't give the staff off for Christmas Day this time. I took off. I went home to visit my mother back in Philadelphia, about 5.5 hours away. I arrived on Christmas Eve, and she had the ham, the potato salad, and the shrimp, and all the special little dishes that I remembered from my childhood. I hadn't been home for Christmas for quite some time, and it was all still there. Plastic candles were in the window, and the phone rang. It was my good friend Rodney Hamilton back at the radio station in Utica, New York. Christmas Eve was payday, and Rodney had been given the assignment of giving out the paychecks. Well, he was rather lazy and thought that rather than put them in envelopes and write people's names on them and distribute them in the mailboxes, he would just tack them all to the bulletin board. And people came in one by one saying the great disparity in pay, and the staff was revolting and threatening to quit on the spot. And I had to get in my car and drive back to Utica, New York that Christmas Eve night and try to salvage the situation. The following year, I was long gone from Utica, living in Lindenwold, New Jersey with my new wife. It was a Christmas I shall not forget. My beautiful little powder blue sports car had some minor problems. Little things like the speedometer kept breaking, and there was a little bit of a problem with the windshield wiper motor. It kept breaking. But other than that, it was a great car, and I just absolutely loved that car. I could not even begin to afford it, but that made no difference. I'd make any sacrifice under the sun to have that car. Well, Laura, my first wife, had not been feeling well for a number of days. And on the Saturday before Christmas, we went out and bought a Christmas tree. That tree cost me $30, which was a lot of money. And it was almost the last $30 we had. But we bought it. As I was bringing the Christmas tree into the house, one of my neighbors was pulling into the parking lot at the apartment complex and smashed into the back of my beautiful little sports car. I remained remarkably calm under the circumstances. It was Christmas after all. Just a couple of days before Christmas, close enough to call it Christmas. And so we exchanged insurance companies and things of that nature and went back into the house and started to decorate the tree. And Laura said that she was really feeling much, much more poor than she had been earlier in the day. And she asked me to take her to the hospital emergency room. And I did. And I sat there for, I'm not really sure how long, it seemed an eternity, waiting to find out what was wrong with my wife right before Christmas. And I saw down the hall a large woman dressed in a nurse's suit, outfit, uniform, whatever you want to call it, with a huge smile on her face, walking down the hall toward me. And 2 or 3 steps behind her was Laura, who did not have a smile on her face. I stood up and I started toward the two of them, and the nurse spoke when I got to be about, maybe 5, 6, 7, 10 feet away from her, and announced the joyous news that my wife was pregnant, which was not joyous news. That night, I had to go over and pick up some lights for the tree with a few remaining dollars that we had. And it was raining, and the windshield wipers weren't working very well, as you'll recall. And I was driving through the Kmart parking lot and ran into a shopping cart, destroying the front end of my car, which had just had the back end of it destroyed. Returning home a little bit later with the Christmas lights and a car now smashed in front and back, plus a wife who was pregnant, we discovered that our cat had eaten the dope which was the only joy that we had in life at that particular point in time. We had no furniture. We had nothing except this miserable cat who ate an entire ounce of marijuana that I couldn't afford, but had bought especially for Christmas. I can't remember anything about 74, 75, or 76. We were separated by the time Christmas 1977 came around. Decided to reconcile. She was with her parents up in Otter Lake, New York. I was, by then, living back in Norfolk, Virginia. Drove for 14 hours, much of it in a blinding, miserable snowstorm. For one of those Courier and Ives locations in upstate New York for a reconciliation. Next Christmas that comes to mind was 1981. I was living in Florida by then. Hadn't been a particularly good year. It hadn't been a particularly bad year. We decided to scrape together whatever we could and bring my mother down to Florida. I didn't really get along that well with my mother. I loved her very much. I just didn't like her very much, you know? Sometimes that kind of stuff happens. And we brought her down the first week in December, and she was to stay until the first week of January, and it was a disaster. Just an absolute disaster. Constant bickering and moaning and picking and nitpicking, and everything that I did was wrong and everything that she did was wrong. I mean, it ranged from don't put the silverware in the dishwasher that way, put it in this way, to, you know, recipes for coffee, to how to dust and when to vacuum. It was a nightmare. I was so glad to load that lady back on a plane and ship her back to Philadelphia, I can't begin to tell you. And we were driving home from the airport that January, and I turned to Laura and I said, I will never do this to you again. Really meaning I'll never do it to myself again. I said, next year, come hell or high water, you and I are going to spend Christmas without that woman. It had become somewhat of a tradition wherever we were living to send for Liz. I'm an only child, and Liz never remarried. So we would send for her every year. And sometimes it was a considerable financial hardship, and sometimes it wasn't. I never discussed anything along the lines of finances with my mother. She never knew if I was working or not working, or how much money I made or didn't make. Frankly, you know a hell of a lot more about my personal finances than she did. So when Christmas 1982 came around, I called my mother and lashed my teeth to her. Told her we couldn't afford to bring her down, knowing full well that she couldn't afford it either. It wasn't true. Happened to be one of the better years I've ever had in my life. I just didn't want to put up with the hassle and the grief and the aggravation. Didn't want to put up with any of that. And I could tell when I talked to her that she was devastated. She was starting to get up in years. She wasn't that old, but starting to reach a point in life where you start thinking about X number of Christmases left and that kind of thing. Her life hadn't gone exactly as she might have hoped it would. And frankly, she didn't have a hell of a lot to look forward to except her son. He wasn't the best son, and he wasn't the worst son. But that's really all she had to look forward to. And I sat there on the phone and lied to her. We had a good Christmas. There was more money to spend because we didn't have to buy our airline tickets. There wasn't any fighting in the house. Anybody telling me how to put the silverware in the dishwasher. We decided that we would bring her down the next year. How the hell was I to know that the last year she'd be alive? That February, she called me and told me that she had a problem with her shoulder and she was going to go see the doctor. That was on the weekend. We usually spoke every weekend. We would alternate. One week she'd call me, the next week I'd call her. On Tuesday, When I got home from work, Laura told me that my mother had called, which was very unusual, and that she wanted me to call her as soon as I got in, and I just literally dropped my briefcase and went over to the phone and called. And she told me that the doctor had examined her and didn't like what he found. That the reason that he thought she had a sore shoulder is because the tumors on her lung were so big that they were interfering with the movement. And that he was going to put her in the hospital the next day for testing. And she'd let me know how the test turned out. They didn't turn out good. By spring, she was in the hospital, and by the summer, she was dead. We went up to clean out her apartment. She had moved into an efficiency in a congregate care center. Room not really any bigger than the studio if it was that big. It was crammed and cluttered with memories of 60 years of life. A little bit of this, a little bit of that. In one of the closets there were hundreds of pounds, and I don't exaggerate, of newspaper clippings. An order. She'd become a hockey fanatic in her latter years, and it's really all she had in her life. And we threw out most of the stuff. Threw out almost all of it, to tell you the truth. Worked our way into the bathroom. Started cleaning that out. Underneath the sink, in a blue box, it was stained. Was a ladyship electric razor. It was corroded. I'd never seen her use it. 26 years later. 26 years after I gave it to her for Christmas. She's still at it.
Word of mouth, they say, is the best kind of advertising an arthritis product can get. We hope so. Listen to what Patricia Ponce of Chicago, Illinois, has to say about all-natural eucalyptus arthritis ointment.
Let's read from her letter, and I'm quoting Patricia.
I've ever spent in my life. I was recently divorced, living in a new town, St. Petersburg, in Florida. I was living in a furnished one-room apartment. Had the day off. I got up, and it was just like any other day. I was just sitting around. I had no place to go, nothing to do. Feeling sorry for myself. Feeling very, very sorry for myself that after 40 years of life, this is the point I had reached. A lousy, furnished, one-bedroom apartment in St. Petersburg, Florida, not a friend in the world. And somewhere around noon, maybe a little bit before, got to thinking, you know what kind of a jerk are you? All the good things that have happened in your life. Yeah, you've had some ups, you've had some downs, but God almighty, you can't sit around feeling sorry for yourself. So I took a shower and I put some clothes on and I went to the grocery store. And I bought a sack of potatoes and some mayonnaise and some celery and some onions and a small Polish canned ham, and I came home and I cooked up the potato salad. Just like my grandmother had made it, just like my mother had made it. Very simple recipe. Put the canned ham in the oven to let it warm up. Opened up the closet where there was one of those moving barrels labeled Christmas treasures that my ex-wife had put together for me. She had separated our Christmas decorations. I hadn't even bothered to open it. But I did at that point and found that basically she had taken all the nice fancy store-bought Christmas decorations and had left me with all of the homemade ones that she had made. She fancied herself quite a handy woman. Unfortunately, she wasn't, but she tried. And inside there was a little ceramic Christmas tree that my mother had made in a ceramics course several years before, and a couple of ceramic Santa Clauses and a couple of ceramic evergreen trees, and I took them out and lit up the little tree and put around the Santa Clauses and had a feast. It's Christmas all over again with potato salad and a ham and a few treasured Christmas ornaments. And I sat there that day and I relived every damn miserable Christmas I could think of. And it was great. All the toys, all the festivities, all the dinners, all the family, all the fun, all the traditions. I had one of the best Christmases I've ever had in my life. Thought about things and people that had passed through my life around Christmas time down through the years. There was Mrs. Powell. Mrs. Powell was Barbara Powell's mother, and Barbara Powell was a girl that I had a horrible crush on back in high school in Collingswood. The Powell household was one of those households where all the kids gathered, you know? Mrs. Powell was a waitress. Kind of a Scrooge, you know? She wasn't really into this Christmas stuff. It was very expensive, you know, a lot of work. And like clockwork, every year on Christmas Eve, Mrs. Powell would become overwhelmed with the Christmas spirit, and she would come home from work at Bruno's Beef and Ale House with a Christmas tree in her trunk. And all the kids would go out and drag in the tree and go up into the attic and get the ornaments, and she would go out in the kitchen and start cooking up a storm, and everybody would just decorate the house and put up that tree and go to Christmas Eve midnight mass. It was the most intense Christmas celebration I've ever encountered in my entire life. And Christmas night, she took the tree down and said the same thing: "I'll never do this again." Until next year, when it was exactly the same. And there was a woman named Mrs. Boswell. I want to make a movie about Mrs. Boswell. She was our landlord back when I was a young kid living at 103 Conard Avenue. She owned the house. She also owned a small gift shop up at the intersection of Haddon Avenue and, oh, grief, Collins Road, yeah. Every year, my mother had an uncle, Father John Welsh, who had a parish in Manasquan, New Jersey, and every year he would send her $10 or $15 as his Christmas present to her. And I don't know how it happened, but that $10 or $15 would immediately be handed over to me, and it was my Christmas budget, which I would spend on my mother. I didn't get an allowance per se, so it was just the way it was. And every year for a number of years, I would go up to the Boswell gift shop. And Mrs. Boswell would tell me to select anything I wanted from the gift shop. And I would bring it to the counter. And it never made any difference what it was. Mrs. Boswell, as adults have a way of doing, would find out from me exactly how much money I had. And lo and behold, whatever I had selected was always just a little bit less than what I had. One year. In tax too, because she paid for it and even got change back. Got a phone call. Somebody said, "You're kidding. I know Mrs. Boswell. She's in her 80s now, and she's moved to such and such a place, and the person gave me her address." And 30 years after the fact, I finally got a chance to thank Mrs. Boswell for what she had done. And one of the greatest Christmas presents I've ever received. So many special events along the way. I started to think about that day sitting in Tampa all by my little lonesome, having the best Christmas I've ever had. There was a time that I sang in a choir at St. John's Catholic School in 5th grade and had a solo in Old Holy Night. Found out in October about it and started practicing immediately. Yes, Lassiter sang Old Holy Night at midnight mass once. started thinking about the Gimbel's Christmas parade and Collingswood, a town of 17,000 people, suburban Philadelphia. The best Christmas parade you ever saw in your entire life, and the prettiest lights and decorations you ever saw in your entire life. Or at least I thought they were. Wonder if they still put them up. Wonder who plays Santa Claus now. Used to be George the Cop. We all knew it was George the Cop. Nobody ever let on publicly, though. It was a great Christmas. Reliving all of the traditions, all of the people that had passed through. They all came to life again. Things have been a lot better since then. There are a lot of new traditions now. My life has changed dramatically. Now I look forward to the cookies that my mother-in-law and sister-in-law bake and send over to us. And tomorrow I'll be in Davenport again. A neat little city, one that I wish I could live in. Last year, they made ham and potato salad for me. Wasn't their traditional Christmas Eve meal, but since I was coming, they made it for me. That's what Christmas is all about. And now there are the lights on Michigan Avenue and Marshall Field's magic and so many things to add to the other memories along the way. Maymont Park in Richmond, Virginia. It was a house built around the turn of the century. Victorian. Big place. Now they hold Victorian Christmases there, and I remember going one very bitter, cold Christmas with a Yule log and a hot cider and the ginger snap cookies. The National Christmas tree, I remember seeing that, driving round and round and round and round the block. How I've startled more than one salesperson. I'm a terror when it comes to Christmas shopping. I mean, I know what I want, I go in and I buy it. And I love to buy women's clothing. I can waltz into a women's clothing department and within 10 or 15 minutes snatch up $500, $600, $700 worth of stuff, slam it on the counter, throw the old credit card up there. When all the other poor guys are walking around saying, oh, God, I don't know. I love it. And I love the look in their eyes, too, the salespeople. Then I started thinking about all the lost treasures, too. Those silly plastic candles that go in the window that I mentioned to you. I don't know why. They mean something to me. I'd kill to have them. How do things like that get lost? You can't throw that kind of stuff away. How does it get lost? Or that reindeer sweater, the one that I used to wear to have my picture taken with Santa Claus. The sweater was only worn one day a year. I only wore it twice in my life. I'd kill to have that back. How did that ever get lost? Or the Lionel train set. God, I hope somebody still has them. I hope they didn't end up in dump someplace. And that electric razor. Holy shit. I lost it and moved. I just don't know how things like that happen. I have no idea how things like that happen. But it's Christmas time again. It's time to relive all of that. Time to relive the tradition. I'll probably watch It's a Wonderful Life again tonight. Already seen Miracle on 34th Street. Every year I find myself rooting for Kris Kringle and not quite so sure that he'll make it this year, but thank God he does. And A Christmas Carol, rejoicing when old Scrooge finally comes around. There won't be a walk down to Knight's Park this year. That was always kind of a thing that you did on Christmas days. You'd walk down there to see the kids with their new ice skates. And I dearly miss the old Andy Williams Christmas specials and that damn bear. He loved his cookies so much. I'd still watch it if it was still on. Seems as though I don't hear the special songs as much as I'd like to hear them. Silver Bells, and I'll Be Home for Christmas, Silent Night. God Rest You Merry Gentlemen. Oh, Holy Night, Carol of the Bells. a beautiful story. I wish I could believe it. I wish I could believe the story about the Savior. But even though I don't, I appreciate it. It's a beautiful thought, a beautiful tradition, one that I hope never, ever, ever dies. Besides, it was always my understanding that Christ came first to teach us how to live in peace and harmony and how to give. The concept of receiving and salvation came only after one had mastered the former. So tonight I will celebrate my 45th Christmas. Mary is the focal point of my Christmas now. We have the most beautiful Christmas tree ever. Somehow every year we always manage to. And tonight we will exchange the best gifts ever, and it will be the best Christmas by far ever. It'll be the best because of the previous 44 Christmases that I will bring with me, and all the Christmases that Mary will bring with her. Even though it will be just the two of us tonight, that room will be filled. My mother will be there, hoping against hope that the potato salad is good this year. It always is. And my grandmom will be there, and Jaji will be there. He'll be dressed up in his Sunday best. I don't know if it'll be the chocolate brown suit or the pearl gray suit. My dad will be there, and he'll hope that there won't be any duplicate presents. There won't be this year. And somewhere Aunt Kate will be fixing up gravy. That delicious, delicious gravy that looks so bad and tastes so good. And Uncle Franny will carve the bird, and he'll probably set aside some shit for me. And the kids will let me play with the toys if I want to. And Aunt Marie and Uncle Joe will stop by with all of their kids. And somewhere, beyond a shadow of a doubt, some kid will get a new English racer, not necessarily just like the one that I got. And we'll both go for that first ride on it. All over again. And some kid will get a new hook and ladder fire truck. And we'll both dream of roaring off to save the day. And somewhere a kid will get a new baseball bat, that's for sure. Sophie and I will count every day until the spring. And somewhere a kid will get a new big stuffed animal. Maybe they'll call him Picklefoot, maybe they won't. But I'll help him hug it. The kids still get things like red wagons and scooters and Lincoln Logs and Boy Scout knives. I hope so. You suppose that they pay extra special attention to each and every detail on Christmas Day and Christmas Eve so that this Christmas will last forever? And some more sentimental as the years pass, and I keep threatening to go out and buy another train set to put under the tree. I didn't this year. Threatened last year and the year before, too. Maybe it's just as well, maybe the set that I would have bought in about 100 things like this. And they'll give it over to the girls I love. And as always, I will hold my breath, hoping against hope that the gifts that I've given will please. Somewhere, everybody that I've ever celebrated Christmas with will gather together again for the very best Christmases around the prettiest tree ever, and we'll feast on the best dinner ever. It will be the best Christmas ever because each and every Christmas of the past is part of this one. That's the nice thing about it. It's cumulative. One adds to the next. Mine are part of yours, and yours are part of mine. In about 2 hours from now, Mary and I will be finishing up supper and tying the pile of wrapped gifts that have been growing geometrically the last couple of days. There's that little brown one on her side of the tree. I'm going to tease her with it the entire night. I won't let her open up until everything else has been opened. I got her a couple of things that she asked for last year. and a couple of surprises. And there's a whole slew of things under the tree for me. Each one has been selected with love and care. My God, what more could you possibly ask for? And the whole family will be there. At least in spirit. I'm sure my mom has forgiven me for lying to her. She always forgives me. I didn't get her anything this year. Thought we'd reopen all of the gifts from years past. A fancy decanter set that she had no use for. The coat that was way, way too big that she wouldn't return. The rigging chart that I got her. Why in God's name would somebody give his mother a rigging chart? I don't know. She said she loved it. A gaudy necklace and bracelet. The warehouse of Christmas presents passed. Well, we opened it again. Putting up with the crowded stores and the long lines and all of the other inconveniences was a very small price to pay. The gift shop collected will bring a smile to Mary's face. Cutting corners and tightening the old proverbial belt for the next month or two in order to pay for it all will be worth it. If it brings a smile to her face, because what happens tonight will have to hurt her. And bright and early tomorrow morning will load up, roll down. Stuff full of bright glass packages and head offices and modern day versions over the river and through the woods. All the benevolent country go. More gifts will be exchanged, more love and devotion. First, of course, we'll have that Christmas feast tomorrow night. One that Evelyn has thought about and planned for weeks now, not even thinking about it. And then the girls, Mary and Sister Sally, will do as they have always done for 3 decades. They'll sort out and individually hand out the presents, and Harvey will preside over it all from his easy chair. And long before the sun goes down, it'll all be over. Some might say it was anticlimactic. The brightly colored wrapping paper will be in the trash, and many of the presents will have already been put away. 5 stories will be heard now, but lights can go back to normal.